This is a special episode on the last day of African History Month 2008. Louis Farrakhan, a man for all ages. The Honorable Louis Farrakhan has been on the scene, the American scene that is, and the international scene for many, many years, many decades. He is the most prominent African speaker in America. There's no doubt about that. He is characterized by the corporate media as a racist, an anti-Semite, homophobic, you name it. And in the address that follows, it's an edited version. It's not his complete address. You can go to the final call of the Nation of Islam site, and it was Saviours' Day 2018 for the full address. But he does cover many timely topics here that are in the news. And let's make a couple of things straight here. We at this broadcast, WBRN Radio, the Boston Red Network, have never promulgated, popularized racist themes, anti-Semitic themes, etc., that are all too often heard, particularly in the time that we live, in the election of DJ Trump. Now, let's separate some things out here. Bannon, who was at one time a principal strategist to DJ Trump, had founded the alt-right movement. The alt-right movement in itself is an organized movement. Many people in it, the white supremacists, are armed. They have an ideological point of view that is racist, that is anti-Semitic. Now, this is a different situation from the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam, first of all, is a religious organization based upon Islam with a mixture of the American African religion based in it, came out of Detroit with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And it is weaved in or intertwined with the 1930s, referring to themselves as toilers. So thus you see an organization that came out of the struggle in the Depression, the unemployed movement, etc. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad moved to Chicago and formed the largest black or African organization in America. Now, there's all kinds of things as to what he said and what he didn't say, what the nation did do. But what we know is that the nation has never been convicted of a hate crime. Now, you find this very unusual. But that is not the nation's business, period, for an organization that has been labeled by some as a hate organization. Now, if you are going to our friends at the Southern Poverty Law Center, if you're going to label someone as a hate organization, you would start with the administration of DJ Trump. Why do we say this? Is because DJ Trump had the audacity after the assassination of Ms. Heyer in Charlottesville, Virginia, by white supremacists that ran her down in the streets, that the white supremacists and the true patriots, the demonstrators there that were demonstrating against the KKK and these various white supremacist organizations, were equally to blame. Now, this is outrageous. And if this is not a hate organization, what is? But you look at the policy, international policies across the globe, what the Zionists are doing in the Zionist state of Israel. Brutal racism that extends from New York to Tel Aviv. And that is not talked about. People are dying there. Palestinians are dying in that state. And that particular state has now turned to a fascist state. And what Minister Farrakhan has said is The Zionists are using Zionism to promulgate a racism that has nothing to do with Judaism, period. But what can happen is the same thing that happens with the so-called evangelical Christians in the U.S., the Phalange that in Lebanon, that they turn a religion into a movement of hate. And this is what we want to bring out here on this last day of African History Week, February. Dr. Woodson, when he brought this about, it was a one-day celebration. We extended it to February, the month of February, which is a short month, but a month that we reflect on the history of African people and African people in the diaspora. As Minister Farrakhan notes there, the film of the Black Panther is a thing of race pride, no doubt about that. And Akbar Muhammad, who is the international representative of the Nation of Islam, has been the nation international representative for many decades, brings out. This does not mean that the film was a perfect film. No, it was not. But it does symbolize some things, very symbolic in nature. Many times things that are symbolic or radical, deeply laced in a rhetoric at a time, get to be actual history along the way. Now, what we have in America is that these ideas of white supremacy that has echoed itself many, many times, starting back in the 60s on a Tricky Dick Nixon, and the so-called Southern strategy. Now, if you look at these two things, and if you read the newspaper, the Times, the Post, watch corporate TV, CBS, NBC, that the most racist person in America is Louis Farrakhan. Absolutely insane. He's not. He's not an official representative of the government, no matter what he says. People within the nation do not have armed camps, walk around with AR-15s. They would be insane. They would be annihilated if they had these so-called training camps that various white supremacy gangs, etc., have and openly have out there. And they have a stated ideology. There's no doubt about that. They are not shameful in bringing it out to the people. But now, after the massacre at Parkland in Florida, the murder of 17 innocent people, wounding of others, there is now a situation out there with the NRA. Now, as far as I know, the NRA has not been characterized as a hate group. When they are espousing, not only espousing hate, they are espousing organized hate and armed hate across the country, and hiding behind the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment itself was promulgated to promote slavery within the country. One needs to know the history of things. So what we're attempting to do in this broadcast is bridge the history. Very rich history from the 50s. Mike Wallace, the late legendary correspondent for CBS News. He was at 60 Minutes for many, many years. He did an interview, several interviews with Louis Farrakhan, the minister, and also there was the TV program about what they labeled the black Muslims. Now, the Nation of Islam had never called themselves black Muslims. Mr. Muhammad never called his movement black Muslims, period. But was it an Afrocentric movement? Yes, it was an Afrocentric movement. But you have to remember, when he formed the nation in the 30s, the nation had lynching in the South, lynchings in the North. It was an apartheid nation. And you have to understand the times that they come. And we circa to 2018 under the slogan of Make America Great Again. No one is fooled by that. They're talking about the 50s. The 50s was a time of apartheid. You just take a look at the present administration, the faces that are there. You will see very, very few African Americans there, very few women there, and the types of sexism that is there. Now, people have said, well, with the nation, as with in Islam, the sexes are separated. Yes, they are. But also, if you go to the Zionist state, Israel we call it, the sexes are separated because it is a religious state. You cannot be even married there unless you go through a secular ceremony, period. So you have to understand where you are and how things are presented to the people. But yet, for political expediency, you would find these ultra-right evangelicals. Now, evangelicals, so-called Christian evangelicals, have their own philosophical base, their own set of quote-unquote values, family values, etc. But what they've done is, from Jerry Falwell Jr. on, they said, look, we have these so-called religious principles, but we don't need to follow them at this time. We have alternative facts, just as the DJ Trump campaign talked about. So although we see DJ Trump as quote-unquote sinful, we still follow him. And we also endorse the Zionist state. There's not a problem with that. But if you're going to have a political movement, you have a political movement. So in other words, there's a lot of brush we have to clear away here. And some of this brush is being cleared away. Side issues, we normally call them. Across much of the world, there is resistance to Zionism and seeing Zionism as a racism, and no doubt about it. But yet in the U.S., we get a one-sided view. In fact, we get very little information, period. We invite people that really want to know about the Mideast situation is read the press, the Jerusalem Post, or the Israeli military newspaper, because you'll get at least the events. Now, you get a little slant there, but at least you'll get the events as they actually happen in the Mideast. Al Jazeera, you'll get the events there. So you start the Times of Israel. If you read those papers, you'll see exactly what the Honorable Louis Farrakhan is talking about. They are very, very critical at times of how things are conducted there, how the lack of transparency and corruption of the government of Bibi Netanyahu. So those things are out there. But this is not our purpose here to settle on that. We have problems in the American state. And the reason to bring Minister forward here is he is one of the leading theologians, I'll call him, and he is one of the leading activists in America as far as African politics is concerned. You'll see a picture of him and then Senator Barack Obama. This was at a so-called Black Caucus meeting, and they're smiling there. And that picture was suppressed. And, of course, Barack Obama had to distance himself from Lewis. But the unfortunate situation was in the 2008 campaign, it didn't matter. They were both seen as the same people. Then there was a campaign that actually Hillary the Monster Clinton invented the birther movement. It was not the right wing that did that, but that was to delegitimize Barack Obama when he was running for president as a senator out of Illinois. And then, of course, when he won the election on one of the racist campaigns that were put out there, they continued to do that. They had the birther movement way before Donald Trump ever showed up, was out there, and the Republicans had set out to minimize his place in history. This is President Obama. We weren't able to do it. The Affordable Care Act was passed, and they are attacking the Affordable Care Act today. What is symbolic? That is nothing but a national racist campaign, period. But what happens there is, as the late Kwame Ture used to say, it goes beyond. Things start out on one level, as where the Nation of Islam is a nationalistic program, but it becomes very quickly an internationalized program as the ministers travels from Iraq to Cuba to South Africa, across the African continent. And if you check out his site, you'll see that this man has become a world leader. And at their annual celebration, always the end of February, he was speaking for several hours on the stage. He's 84 years old, and you can believe he was up there that long. You try speaking that period of time. At the mic here, we rarely speak over 45 minutes, and that is about it. And not 85 years old. We were lecturing, it was a few weeks back, where we spoke for about an hour. And that in itself is, and we were not on the hot lights. It's not that easy to do, let's just say that. So when you start taking apart history, and in this little lecture he's giving here, is the edited version of it, but he does cover same things. In fact, he addresses another issue that has come out in the press lately involving the progressive Congress type from Minnesota, Keith Ellison. Keith Ellison at one time was in the Nation of Islam. So there's a photo of him passing out the final call, which is all digital these days, incidentally. But nonetheless, he was passing it out. So reactionaries within the Democratic Party, we assume, brought that out, and it was in the local paper about a meeting that was held with the president of Iran. And the Muslims were all there. Keith Ellison was there, various other Muslims in the Congress, Muslim leaders throughout the U.S. And obviously, Minister Farrakhan was there also. So he brought this up. It quickly disappeared. A local Jewish leader vouched for Keith Ellison. That used to be a situation where a fellow once told me, he was from Alabama, that if you come to Alabama, you would be my boy, or something to that effect. I'm cleaning this up a little bit. I said, oh. So in other words, he'd vouch for me in Alabama. Well, that is leftover of Jim Crow and Plessy Ferguson days, etc. But this is what's happening in 2018. You imagine that a European had to vouch for an African that he's a good person. Well, Representative Ellison tried to run for the head of the Democratic Party, and he was blocked at every junction. No doubt he is one of the most progressive people in the Congress, a supporter of Bernie Sanders, and we know the history of Bernie Sanders. They even tried to jump out there, and the Clinton campaign started to run a bunch of anti-socialist red baiting out there, and anti-Semitism, saying, well, it's not bad enough that Bernie is a socialist, but he happens to be a Jewish socialist. Well, so what? People flock to Bernie like letters to paper. So that we've come a long ways. We're not in a perfect situation here, but we have to understand that we live in the USA in a very racist country that has been energized. We not only hear the word white supremacy, but white privilege, and now people admit it. Well, there's no problem with that. If you got white privilege, so what? You admit you have white privilege. You have these various racist organizations that are organized out there, and they're not only organized, they were in the White House, and they still have Stephen Miller in the White House there. But at the same time, our friends at the Southern Poverty Law Center, as far as I know, have not labeled Miller a hate organization or a hate person. And he's a speechwriter for the President of the United States. Now, when you have that kind of situation going on and these elements out here, and not only that, they're an international operation from the Russian Federation on. You hear these nationalist groups espousing this hate in France and other places. Period. So we live in a very troubled time, and the advice I'd have of Minister Farrakhan, if I'm giving him advice, is tone it down a bit, because we understand Zionism out here and what Zionism does, but at the same time, you don't want to put things out to the public. And we were talking about this in an editorial meeting, what we would present and what we're not. We're not here, obviously, to denounce Mr. Farrakhan, because Mr. Farrakhan has had over 50 years of continuous service to the African American community. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, it's presentation. Now, DJ Trump has decided that how he will present things. He's presenting things in the most racist, reactionary standpoint, whether it be talking about immigrants from Mexico running around murdering people, asshole nations. You get away with that sort of thing. But yet at the same time, the media and corporate community got a little tax break going there. With these corporations, they moved from, 35% down to 22%. And the money that they've got, we'll get to this later, but basically they are buying back their own stock. They're not necessarily investing that much money to develop their companies and bring about jobs. First of all, you have to have development to get jobs. And the nation does talk about development. They do talk about jobs. But if they spent more time on development and jobs, less time on Scientology and other things, that's the unfortunate thing. But that's part of the American atmosphere, we'll call it, or the American social scene, that you get into these kinds of things. And you have to remember that they are a religious organization, not a secular organization, a little bit different. But at the same time, they're in the body politic and have been in the body politic. In fact, at one time, the nation did not even vote. Upon Jesse Jackson's campaign, Louis registered to vote. And that campaign was a very interesting campaign, 1988. Because one of the biggest supporters and funders of it was no other than DJ Trump himself. Go figure. So in other words, things are not in a straight line in this country. They do not line up in a straight line. So we have to look at whether it be DJ Trump, his administration, or Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, is dialectically. There are positives and there are negatives in everything. Period. So we'll do the sports, and then we'll go to the minister from the south side of Chicago, Louis Farrakhan, who will be, he's 84 years old now, and he's born in the Bronx, New York, same place as Bernie. And he'll be 85 on very, very shortly here, May the 11th, born 1933. In the Bronx, and he was also the minister in Boston at one time. In fact, he's the man that actually pinned the name Boston Red on us. I guess he figured we were happy atheists. But anyway, there's always some things that come out here a long, long time ago. But we look at our current political makeup, and we see, how things are going in the country here, how people are organizing in the Me Too movement. That is progress. So we have to start looking at things out there and where the politics of the country are and where they are going. Looking at some recent polling here, deviate a little bit here. The tax cuts, how will they affect? It was in Indiana. It was a Washington Post story. How will they affect the midterm elections? Will people go with the extra $45 or $40? One guy said in his paycheck, where it was a pittance, he could have at least maybe a couple of pizza dinners at depending on where he went. But one of the cheaper pizzerias, I suppose, across the place that he could actually go to. So we finished the Olympics. We have a lot of things going on around here at the same time. I had Olympics on the Korean Peninsula, and it came out in a pretty good condition, actually. Let's go to sports now. We start with the Bulls. With the Hornets. The Hornets won 118-103. The Nets and Cavaliers in Cleveland. Cavaliers 129-123. The 76ers in Heat in Florida. A 1-point game. Heat 102-101 for the 76ers. The Wizards and the Bucks in Milwaukee. Wizards 107-104. The Kings and Trailblazers in Portland. Trailblazers 116-99. And finally, the Clippers and Nuggets in Denver, 2-point game there. Clippers 122-120. On to baseball. Cardinals and Red Sox. Cardinals 6-1 in that contest. Win spring training, incidentally. The Pirates and Atlanta tied 3-3. The Marlins and Nationals, again a 2-2 tie here. The Tigers and Phillies. Tigers 11-6 in that contest. The Orioles and Rays. Orioles 2-1. The Yankees and Blue Jays 9-8. Yankees over Toronto. The Astros and Mets. Astros 8-2. The Athletics and Cleveland. Cleveland 16-8 over Oakland. The Mariners and the Royals. It was all Kansas City 14-9. The Reds and the Brewers. Brewers 6-3. The White Sox and Cubbies. Cubs 6-5. Cubbies had 10 hits, no errors, and the Sox 11 hits and 2 errors. The Rangers and Dodgers 4-4 tie there. Whoops. The D-backs and Giants. Giants 14-12. The line score there. D-backs 11 hits, no errors, and the Giants 14 hits and 4 errors, but they still won the game. The Padres and Mariners. It was all Padres 11-6 in that contest. The Angels and Rockies. Angels 5-2. And in another game, I guess it's probably inter-squad. I'm not sure about that. But Red Sox and Twins. Sox 3-2 in that contest. On to college basketball. University of Miami and North Carolina, number 9. It was all the University of Miami there. And, let's see. 91-88. Number 14, Auburn and Arkansas. Arkansas pulled it out 91-82. Number 16, Tennessee and Mississippi State. It was all Tennessee 76-54. And St. John's and number 17, Rhode Island. It was all St. John's here. St. Joseph's, I'm sorry about that. 78-48. Oh, on to the National Hockey League. The Hurricanes and Bruins. Bruins 4-3. Devils and Penguins. Devils beat out Penguins 3-2. Senators and Capitals. Capitals 3-2 there. Maple Leafs and Panthers. Panthers 3-2. The Blues and the Wild was all Wild there 8-3. The Predators and Jets. 6-5. The Nashville Predators and the Winnipeg Jets. Flames and Stars. Flame was put out there. Stars 2-zip. The Kings and Golden Knights of Las Vegas. It was all Kings 4-1. And the Oilers and the Sharks of San Jose. It was the Sharks of San Jose 5-2. Thus, good day. On to the minister from the south side of Chicago, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. Good day.
Them disciples of Jesus, I ain't know that man. I never seen him before. And they run away from me like I've got a plague. I'm surprised that you all showed up. So you must either have been sent by the devil to listen to what I said, but you don't have to do that. I'll give you the tape. You can take it to the FBI office. The FBI has been the worst enemy of black advancement. Can you prove that, Farrakhan? See, the Jews have control over those agencies of government. Oh, boy. That's right. I said, well, if you thought you were going to find an old decrepit Farrakhan. I got a lot of more juice. This enemy he's so angry with Farrakhan that now if you like me, you have to either hide it, especially if you want advancement in the white man's world. Now, if you go to work tomorrow and Jews are your boss, don't tell them where you've been. They said, where did you go yesterday? I went to the movies and I saw Black Panther. And boy, let me tell you, I feel like a new woman and a new name because I see I got black heroes and they ain't mulattoes. So we mulattoes I've always wanted to see the black man rise. And when I see dark-skinned black people, I'm not a hater. No. That's right. But I know the advantages that white folk give us who are light-skinned because of their blood in us. And they want to say, well, he's a nigger, but it's our blood in him that's making him great. Well, I got some Jewish blood in me. What you gonna say? They wish I didn't have none. Oh, man. When you hear me play the violin, you hear the schmaltz. He's a real Jew. He can't help himself. I got Jews on the album with me. I got Gentiles. In fact, in one piece I'm doing a Bach. I got a Jew playing the viola, a Jew playing the cello, and I'm playing the violin. I said, wow, that's like Jesus with the two thieves. No. These Jewish persons that were with me, their rabbis didn't want them at all to do it, but they did it in spite of their rabbis. You can only be ruled by your desires if your desires are not in check. So now, my brother Ellison, if he come in the room with me, would you put him back up, please? Hello. No, not that picture. You know, because he don't want to admit that he sold the final car. That's right. So I ain't mad. I'm not mad at that brother. I want him to do what he wants to do. Help your people. But the president of Iran invited us to a dinner with the president. He had Muslims from all over the country. And Keith Ellison was one. Andre Carson was one. Brother Munir was one. I was one. We were there. Now, I'm a Muslim. If I see my brother, I ain't got no grudge. The boy did what he wanted to do. But when I see him, I have a duty as a Muslim to say, Assalamu alaikum, brother. That's right. That's right. But the poor man just in the room with me, I must have let off such an odor, it went back to Israel. And they said, Lord, we've got to punish him for being in the same space with Farrakhan. They went to the members of the Congressional Black Caucus that looked like they were smiling at me. So be careful. Act like you don't have teeth at all. And they're making all my brothers to suffer. I'm closing. Why do they hate me with so much passion? Because Jesus, my brother, who was their last prophet, was 2,000 years too soon. I'm on time. Second Thessalonians 2:9. That day shall not come except there be a falling away first, and the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. These wicked Jews, not the righteous Jews, these wicked Jews that you find in Revelation. And that's what Billy Graham said to Nixon. There's two kinds of Jews. This is Billy. Billy! He said there's the kind in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9 that say they are Jews and are not, but they are of the synagogue of Satan. Now, he said that to Nixon, but silly Joe Biden Silly joke. He goes in the face of the Jews and don't know how to handle their power. So he said, you all, praising them, single-handedly, through Hollywood, made America accept same-sex marriage. And I mean, it was in the paper, and then, of course, it was gone. Now, to my dear, beloved brothers and sisters who are lesbian or homosexual or LGBTQ, I don't have no dislike for you. I'm your brother. I love you. But wait, I am a minister of the real Christ. I can't tell you that you are acceptable. I can tell you, you can come as you are. But with Christ, you can't stay that way. Now, wait. Now, some of us going to have to make some change in order to be in the kingdom of God. You feel bad? I'm not your enemy. But in Israel, they have gay parades in the Holy Land. And they're having the gay parade a few kilometers away from what remains of Sodom and Gomorrah. They're not instructed by history. God did not create man to lay with man. But you are being chemically programmed against your nature. You don't know it. When Dr. Wesley tells you these things, you get angry with God. But the government knows they have a plan that comes out of the CIA, MK Ultra, where they are targeting black men to make us soft. They hated the violent tendency of the 60s. And now they want to reprogram us to be soft. So the Jews that run television, they have black people on it, but they want the softest ones. The sweetest ones. And they get angry if we say something and say we're homophobic. I don't hate people who are lesbian. I got it in my family. What? What? Let me tell you something. Our families are the same as the world. The world don't stop getting us into trouble because we are Muslim. So hell, don't act like you're perfect. You know damn well you're not. But that don't stop us from loving our kinfolk that are victims of a psychological, chemical imbalance. And whatever's in the world is in us. does not care to punish us by his blood. He wants to save us. And do you know if the blood is purified of the chemicals that the enemy is putting in food, in the water, your thought processes will be different. So how to eat to live, we go back to that. Learning how to fast. If you can't discipline your stomach, you can't discipline your sex organ. So you're being ruled by your sex, by your desire for that kind of pleasure. It is momentary, not lasting long. So the Quran said man is made in haste. It don't take a lot to make a baby. God. So I want us all, by God's grace, to thank God that a Savior has appeared. Thank God that a Savior has appeared. Thank God that a man that got that kind of knowledge and that kind of power has chosen us to be his people, and he has come to be our God. He's the real Jesus. Yes, sir. He loves us. Yes, sir. He didn't come to kill us. He came to save us from our sins. Yes, he did. So by his blood. Stephanie. By his blood. He has saved us. Yes. And we are still in the process of being saved. He hasn't stopped saving. You said it right. Jesus saved. Not the one 2,000 years ago. He's as dead as Abraham and Moses. But the one we represent, he's alive. He's well. He's in power. And I'm on my way to him. I hope I have learned and earned my passage. Yeah. I need the God to give me the juice. So that when I return, inshallah, you won't see the same man that you see leaving. I'm not drunk. No, sir. Not at all. I haven't smoked no reefer. That's right. I'm not a victim of delusion. But they're coming for me and us. Yes, sir. They can't take it no more. And I don't give a damn, because I'm not going to stop preaching because they don't like it. So, when they come, some of us, we're going to have to fight some. Some of us go to jail. But we've been in jail all our lives. Some of us may be killed.
Yes, sir.
But you're killing yourself with the way you're not taking care of yourself.
Yes, sir.
I have lived a good life.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I have whatever any human being would want,
Yes, sir.
if that's what I wanted.
Yes, sir.
Nothing of this world means anything to me.
Think about this. Think about this. Yes, sir.
Not the cars, not clothes, not the this, not the that. Let me tell you, I know if somebody offered you some money to do something to Farrakhan, some of you might do it. But I'm telling you, see, just the government's thinking about harming me. I'm laughing. Because the God I serve, can't wait to kill the enemy that has been our enemy for 463 years. So Trump, you and the boys can do all you want to do to me. But with my dying breath, I know that I'll be the last black man that you ever killed. But I just don't think God is going to let it happen. So, in my end of this long, lovely day, I am so happy to see you and to let you know from my heart, I love you. And I thank Allah for what you have brought into my life. For all my family has been my teacher. They've been teaching me. A man can't learn women if he don't have one. Because the problem of the world is the female. Because it's through you that the whole new world is coming. So God gives his man what will teach it. And I thank God for my wife, Khadijah. I thank God for her. I wouldn't be who I am if it was not for her.
Yes, sir.
She's the wind beneath my wings. And I have what God brought into my life. And they are my teachers. I couldn't be what I am and know what I know if they didn't share the wisdom of their being with me. I have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, and I'm here to see them all. been my help. And I thank Allah for each and every one of you. And it gives me joy even to lose my life if it would make you free. Because I can never die. I can never die. Why do you say that, Farrakhan? Because the word that I teach is in so many. And they're growing up into that strength and that power. That makes them one with Elijah. No, man. So don't even weep if you hear that I'm dead. Say that boy did his job. The world will never be the same again. White folks are going down. And Satan is going down. And Farrakhan, by God's grace, has pulled the cover off of that satanic Jew. And I'm here to say, your time is up. Your world is through. And the good Jews, you better separate from these satanic Jews lest they take you down to hell with them, because that's where they're headed. Saudi Arabia, you better stop listening to Netanyahu. You better come back to Allah. And if you don't know how to get to him, take my address. May Allah bless you. May Allah keep you. May Allah make the light of his countenance to shine on each and every one of you and give you peace henceforth, now, and forevermore. Thank you for listening. I love you, love you, love you, love you, love you. Assalamu alaikum.
Just come on, brothers and sisters, let's put our hands together for none other than the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! That means God is the good. It's due to Allah for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Come on, keep your hands going. He worked harder than us today. We want to apologize.